It's the South Carolina Good Life Podcast.
Welcome to another episode of the South Carolina Good Life Podcast. Today, I'll be your host, Tiara Pitts. I serve as the Director of Fair Housing for South Carolina Realtors and the liaison to our statewide Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Council. I'm also a member of the South Carolina Bar, and I serve on the SCR legal team. Today, I am honored to be joined by some great guests in celebration of Black History Month. We'll be highlighting the contributions of our African American realtors and realtors who have made some very important strides to be able to get us where we are today. First, I would like to introduce Denise Franklin, who served as the 2023 DEI Chair for SCR. Denise is a past president of the Greater Greenville Association of Realtors and the founding president of the Upstate Realtors Association of NARAB. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
And second, I'd like to introduce Mr. John Washington, who has practiced real estate since 1969 and is currently at the South Carolina Real Estate Exchange. Today, we're going to be learning more about Mr. Washington's story, how he was involved in building and development, and a lawsuit that he was a part of that we are going to learn all about. So thank you for taking your time to join us today.
Thank you also for having me here.
Thank you. And third, I'd like to introduce Morris Morgan Jr., who is an agent at Morris Morgan Realty, where he's practiced for over 25 years. He currently serves as the president of the Columbia chapter of NARAB. And lastly, I'd like to introduce Chuck Ruff, who began practicing in 1973 and currently transitioned to international financing for a group that he founded and a company he founded and created, Global One Capital Group. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so we're going to get started. And as I said, this is all in celebration of Black History Month and learning more about you guys and what you've been able to do throughout your time in the industry. So first, I'm going to ask you all, how did you even get it started in real estate?
Well, I will start the ball rolling by telling my story. My story is interesting in that I was, like most youngsters, highly ambitious and ready to set the world on fire. And I found that I couldn't because of a certain factor that showed up that kept coming up over and over and again, and that was the color of my skin. It made me behind the eight ball very often when I felt that I shouldn't be, didn't want to be, should not have been. I like the idea that America was founded on the basis that all men are created equal. But when we got into the workplace, when we got into the communities and neighborhoods, we quickly discovered that there was no equality, that we had to struggle, that Black folks, the darker you were, the more you had to struggle to become a part of the American picture. Now, you could, fortunately, with plenty of hard work and dedication, become a part of the American picture, but it took time and energy and effort more than it did from other folks to do the same thing. So I got into the market also trying to find a way to be a part of the market, to be a full-fledged, honorable, respected part of the market. And that is what my quest has been throughout the years, to be a legitimate, functioning part of the real estate market.
Oh, what about you?
My story is not, unfortunately, as great as Mr. Washington's story, but my entry point into real estate. Of course, my dad, Morris Morgan Sr., opened Morris Morgan Realty in 1977. And of course, growing up in real estate, I saw how fun it was. I also saw the struggle in which, these gentlemen had to endure. So when I became of age, I figured I would follow his steps into the real estate world. And of course, there I was able to help our generation, my generation of Black individuals to obtain home ownership, which is something that, of course, the older generations didn't have. They had there was few opportunities for home ownership. Fortunately, because we're on the backs of these fine gentlemen, Mr. Ruff and Mr. Washington, the opportunities for home ownership is much, much better, is greater. So I was able to help carry the baton, hand it off from these gentlemen and pass that on to the next generation of realtors, of real estate agents, of realtors. And my goal is for them to remember, from where we came to where we need to go.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you. And Denise?
So for me, my start, I was in college, wanted to become a nurse. And I transitioned from college to real estate. Mine is a little simple, not as complex as some of you at this table. So,
What about you, Mr. Ruff? How did you get involved in real estate?
I worked at Allied Chemical in research and development and quality control in the lab for a few years, and I started buying and selling houses from the highway department. And every time I listed a house, I got 15 calls from realtors and nobody wanted to buy. And eventually I met John Washington, and I bought my first house from John, my second house from John on Mandel Drive in Columbia. I worked there for 11 years after leaving Benedict College, and I went into partnership with a friend of mine. We worked together for a company, and eventually we dissolved and started my own company in 1977, but I started in 73.
So in the 1970s, were Black people allowed to practice in the ways that they are today with real estate and with our MLS?
No, not quite.
Not quite,
When
not by
we
a long shot.
entered the business, we weren't allowed to join associations, nor have access to multiple listing books. And that's what precipitated our going to get an attorney. We went to several different attorneys. My attorney told me to keep my mouth shut. But we found a guy named Tom Broadwater, who was a pretty determined fellow back in the day. And so we bought a lawsuit, and that gave us access to the association. The Realtors Association has always been pretty open. They gave us access, and then, of course, several of our large companies formed another association to keep us out, and so we sued them.
Who exactly was on the other end of the lawsuit with the MLS issue?
The Association of Realtors used to control the listing service, and we filed a suit to become members. Mm-hmm. They were gracious and allowed us in. But certain realtors, the bigger companies, formed a separate listing service called the Consolidated Multiple Listing Service.
And that's what we have today, right?
That's what we have today. It's outside of it.
Before we get there, though, we had to bring a lawsuit first.
Yeah.
To even get in the market. We were denied an opportunity to become members of the multiple listing service, where we could put our listings in and have them served by the real estate industry just as the others. But before we got there, we were systematically denied the opportunity to even operate in the market, to take our customers where we wanted to take them or where they wanted to go, to sell them where they wanted to buy and what they wanted to buy, what they could afford to buy. So before we got to suing the real estate industry itself, I mean, the multiple listing service itself, we had to sue the real estate industry in order to function in the market. Now that's where Chuck and I came in the picture. Chuck wanted to live in a certain neighborhood. He came to my office and said, write the contract for me on this particular house, which I did. I took that contract to the builder and he denied it, which was traditional, routine. That was what happened in the market. They told us where to go, when to go, how to go, and what to do when we got there. Now, we wanted to be like all the other realtors. I wanted my customer, who was Chuck Ruff at the time, to be processed through the lending institutions and at the same time to be able to live comfortably in the house that he purchased. So before we got to suing the organization that ran the industry, we had to sue for the privilege of operating in the market. I think that's important to mention here because it is where we really began. It is the thing that we had to, it's the hurdle that we had to get over before we got to the real estate industry.
A hassle, you know, and then once prior to getting in, I always had friends from the other side who were in real estate. It's kind of funny because we had multiple listing books back in those days. So I would get a multiple listing book from 2 or 3 brokers so that our agents would have access to those listings. And it was a tough time. We caught the devil, to say it politely,
So
for a number of years.
Were you nervous to bring forth a lawsuit like this against such a big industry? Was this something that, you know, you were scared about your safety or about any type of potential retaliation against doing something like this?
No, I wasn't afraid. It never bothered me a bit.
Well, you see,
do what you had to do.
Chuck is an unusual factor.
I don't know about that.
That he functioned out there without having any apprehensions of what could have happened to him. And I'd like to point out to everyone here and to everyone listening that it was only a few years earlier that they would take little black boys like myself out to the nearest oak tree and hang them if they didn't cooperate, if they didn't do things the way they said they should be done. And we had come a long way because of people like King and Malcolm X and others who spilled their blood so that we could get out there. And if we had not, we would have been derelict in our responsibility. If we had not taken advantage of the opportunities that they had made available for us. But that's where Chuck and I came in. A few years earlier, if I had taken a contract to the builder and said, my client is black and I want you to process, they could have taken me to the nearest tree and gotten away with it. But King and others had gone to the bat, so to speak, and helped to set the record so that we could get out there and say, here is a contract, accepted, or I will sue you, and get away with it. We had come a long way to that point. Yeah. And that's why I was saying, Chuck, it is so important to get to the point of our lawsuit before we get to the fact that we had to sue the realtors. Because if we were not out there, we would not have had a need for the realtors.
And there were several that came before us outside of the Columbia area. We had Eugene Montgomery from Orangeburg and Earl Middleton from Orangeburg, who worked in Columbia with Langley Construction. Langley did a lot of houses on Farrell Road and other areas, and they were his agents. And of course, Gene was prominent in the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, which we all participated in before being allowed into the realtors.
Mr. Washington, Mr. Ruff, when you asked Mr. Washington to write the offer, and Mr. Washington, after you wrote it and you presented it to the builder, was there any thought in your mind that the builder would not accept it?
Well, I was fully aware when I took them that contract that he might not accept it, that it was in the wrong location, that is, it was in a location that they had told me as a black boy not to work in, not to go there. And I had done it anyway. I had taken Mr. Ruff, my client, my customer, there. He had looked at this house and liked it. And I had the nerve to present to the builder an offer on that house. So I said a little earlier, Chuck was a little different. He had a stronger backbone than I had. So it didn't concern him very much about what would happen to him or his family. But I was fully aware of the fact that a few years earlier, had it not been for the marches, the sit-ins, the other factors that had brought America to the awareness that black folks are a contributing factor to this country. If they had not come there, we could not have done what we did. But thanks to his backbone, I was able to move along effectively with the contract and said to the builder, now you accept this contract or we will take you to court. We could take him to court at that time. He did not accept the contract. We took him to court. And in doing so, we won that suit and made the market far more friendly to black folk than it had ever been before. Made it possible for Chuck Ruff to later get into the real estate business and for Mr. Morgan to get into the real estate business. And for out of that lawsuit came a requirement that every real estate company across the country post an equal housing symbol in their office.
From your lawsuit.
From our lawsuit.
Yeah.
Now, Chuck mentioned the fact that Broadwater brought the suit against the realtors. It was my good friend who brought the suit that Chuck and I put on the table. And he was where Black folks should always have been: competent, capable, knowledgeable, and ready.
But the realtors really had no big issue with it. Once we talked with the attorney, who later became a friend of mine, as well as the other key leaders, they let us in. Of course, once we got in, we had the local fight over the listing service. That lasted for a number of years because I think they started out with about 17 companies, but they had 2/3 of the listings. And so they set the criteria high. I've forgotten what the numbers were, but they had to have so many listings to join. So we got that number of listings, we applied again. We got a number of listings, they applied it again, they raised it again.
Oh, wow.
And eventually we went the route of a lawsuit, and they acquiesced and allowed us to join. And I recall we had one tumultuous meeting at the townhouse, and a prominent realtor at the time said, "I want to know what Chuck Roof wants." He wouldn't call me Rupp. And I said, "I want to be on the board." And so, as I recall, I had several friends who told me, said, "Have all the brokers that come and make certain they spread out. So they won't vote against you." And sure enough, that's what we did. And I served on the board, CML, for I think 10 or 12 years on the board of realtors also. So I always felt that in order to make an effective change, you had to be involved. You couldn't sit on the sideline and just join. And that way you kept up with what was going on. And I've had great relations with a number of prominent realtors as a result of that.
Wow. Well, that is an inspiring story and helps us to see where we are now, because sometimes people can think a lot of this discrimination and things happened so long ago, and they don't realize it's still within our lifetime or our grandparents' lifetime that these things were occurring. So it kind of puts it into perspective that just in the 1970s, you weren't allowed to be in the MLS, you weren't allowed to live in certain places, and now here we are. So I think that'll, for viewers that didn't know that or that were thinking, this is just very old, can kind of see it's not as far removed from where we are today as you may think.
And all this took place, the lawsuits, the tribulations that you all had to go through after the Fair Housing Act of 1968 was passed. So because of that Fair Housing Act, they should not have gone through what they went through.
Right.
But unfortunately, they did, and fortunately, they had the vigor, the fight in them to do what these two fine gentlemen did.
Well, it was quite trying. We had several things that happened. There was more activity as it relates to discrimination in the multiple listing side than with the realtors. I have absolutely no problem with the Association of Realtors. And of course, I was privileged to serve as president of the board of the Columbia Association and was Realtor of the Year, and
Oh, wow.
served on this board for about maybe 12 years, I think. I don't know exactly what that was, but I made some great friends and great people to work with. It was on a local level that we had problems, and I recall some of the things that were said when we joined about not wanting certain people to show houses and why they didn't want them to show. Things would come up missing and all that kind of nonsense. And but we overcame those things, and I don't think I'm not in it today, but I don't think it's a problem for people today, as I know. But it was a good run, and I think we did quite well in order to bring more people into the business.
I think that's awesome. So your lawsuit that happened in Columbia after, Morris, as you pointed out, after the Fair Housing Act of 1968 was instrumental in getting the logo on the equal housing logo.
And there were lawsuits across the country.
Oh, yes.
Bought by National Association of Real Estate Brokers, a black counterpart to the realtors, particularly like Atlanta, where they split the board, the Atlanta Board of Realtors, North Atlanta Board of Realtors. Mm-hmm. It was a constant practice across the country, similar to what you had in schools, but so many people don't know that story. It was a challenge.
And I think something should be said in a meeting like this, that we've come a long way, but we've come to where we are on the shoulders of giants. Now, real estate would not be where it is today were it not for NARAB, who picked up the ball when it was out there and ran with it and said, we are here. You've got to recognize this. We're not going to let you overlook us any longer. Now, we still have problems. I brought the lawsuit against a builder for not allowing me to sell his homes. But then I still had to struggle against the mortgage industry, because a case that would normally take 3-4 weeks to get through the system normally, if it were mine or some other black real estate, probably would take 5 or 6 or 7 weeks to get through. So you're taking the same amount of time to earn less money than the average white builder, because the average white builder is selling homes for $200,000, and your maximum is probably $85,000, $90,000, $100,000. So at the end of the year, the income looked significantly different. You have done twice as much work, and you've earned half as much money, because your clients, because they're black, are earning $50,000 a year, while the average white client is earning $150,000 a year, and it does make a difference. So we went from one degree of difficulty to the next, and that's why I wanted to mention the fact that my good friend here was president of NARAB for how long?
This is my second term, so it's probably 10 years.
Without that organization, none of us would be where we are.
Wow. Now we have Denise and Morris, who both serve in NARABs currently. What can you tell us about what that organization's goal is and why people, especially African Americans, should get involved with NARAB, even if they are realtors as well, why they should do dual membership and be a realtist?
Well, NARAB, going back to the Fair Housing Act, was instrumental in supporting that bill. There was no other real estate organization out there that supported the Fair Housing Act, so they helped to push it through. And of course, they fought for several years to get to that point where it finally passed. The organization then, of course, fought for fair housing, make sure not only Black real estate agents, loan officers, but Black homeowners got the fair footing that our counterparts had back then. Today, that struggle is different. Fortunately, we don't have to go through the hoops that these fine gentlemen had to go through back then. But unfortunately, NARAB still exists. It still exists because, there are some, aspects of discrimination that are out there, whether it be on the housing side or on the lending side. And just like Mr. Washington mentioned, unfortunately, it does take Black homeowners when their loans are being processed, take those few extra weeks. So it's very instrumental. NARAB is instrumental to continue on the fair housing fight today.
Yeah, there was an article that came out several weeks ago that with one of the well-known credit unions, 60% of Black mortgage applicants were denied a mortgage. So we're still fighting for equality in homeownership, mortgage, which includes mortgage lending. One of the other areas that we are fighting for is appraisal bias. What Mr. Washington mentioned, that you could purchase a home for $200,000 in one neighborhood, and that same a Black homeowner with a very similar home, their home may appraise for and sell for much less than that. So we are trying to increase the number of Black appraisers within NARAB. So maybe we can hopefully eliminate appraisal bias. And then there's the the pricing based on your credit report or credit score with the mortgage applications. They oftentimes Black mortgage applicants are paying a higher rate or paying a higher mortgage insurance premium. So we're fighting for those things as well. And for many Black homeowners, brown homeowners, down payment is an issue for them. So they may have the income, they may have the credit, but they don't have the down payment. So that is preventing home ownership. So we are trying to increase down payment assistance.
Wow, that's really good.
So I would say also on February 7th in Charlotte, North Carolina, NARAB will be presenting its Sheba report, which is the state of housing in Black America. And it speaks to Black home ownership, which is lower now than it was after World War II. Also, that report will talk about how many Black mortgage applicants were approved versus how many were denied.
So that, even though we've definitely come a long way, I still today people talk to me as my position as the director of fair housing, or just, when we're out at these real estate events and they say, I feel that my client was denied because they're Black, but I can't prove it. So a lot of the times is that you have this feeling and you work with other clients and you see people that are similarly situated, and the only difference is their skin tone, but they can't, no one's going to put on the application denied because you're Black. So we only know on the back end when that data comes out. But some people feel like, everything's fine now when it's still happening, but it's different. It's different ways that I think it is occurring, and it's becoming maybe more difficult for people to be able to just prove it as when they may have just outright said it to your face. It may be like behind the scenes things that are going on from my experience from talking to people.
Absolutely. It's subtle. It's not as abrasive or bold as it was. And then we have people that are not as bold as Mr. Ruff. We have builders, real estate agents that are steering purchasers to a particular lender. You've got to use this particular lender. It happens frequently in new construction, and they are not willing to file a complaint, which is unfortunate because fair housing say that you cannot steer, you cannot impede. We have the right. South Carolina is a buyer's choice state. So the buyer gets to choose their closing attorney, but oftentimes they're steered or directed to one direction or the other. And it is in many cases because the lender is owned and the builder, they have the same parent company. So
sometimes it's hard to get the buyers to make an effort to bring about a change also. They'd just rather walk away. That was always my biggest gripe. I recall one instance where I had a veteran who was turned down 3 or 4 times. And this particular gentleman at the VA was actively involved in Boy Scouts because we were on 2 or 3 committees with the Boy Scouts together. So when I learned that the buyer was an Eagle Scout, had been an Eagle Scout, and headed a Boy Scout troop, we met at my office on Laurel Street one day, and I told him to wear his uniform and go down and talk with this gentleman. I won't call his name. And he did. Got approved the next day.
After having been turned down 3 times.
Yeah, so sometimes you just have to step out and say, no matter what's going to happen, I'm going to do this and do it. And oftentimes we found that to be the reluctance of some brokers to get involved in certain things because of advice they got from other people or just fear. And you won't ever do anything as long as you're scared.
And sometimes
May I add here, in addition to what Chuck has already said, that we are still not out of the woods. I read a statistic just a few days ago that at the turn of the 18th century, Black folks owned 90 million acres of land in this country. Today, we own 5 million acres of land in this country. Now, a lot of us, when we left the farm, we were glad to get away from it. We were saying we'll never come back to that kind of servitude again. And we meant that. When we got to the north and started working in the factories and producing automobiles and what have you, we became content. And when our land, the farm we used to be on, came up for taxes, we said, so what? We forgot about it. We had no intention of coming back to the South, so we left somebody else to buy that land for a song. So we've gone from 90 million of acres of land, Black folks, across the US of A to 5. I hope we will find ways to reverse that trend in the near future?
Well, you know, NARAB had a plan. Your dad remembers it, and you probably remember it too, John. They had a land loss seminars that they did across the country.
Very good.
Here in Columbia. We must have had the biggest crowd I'd ever seen. Something, I don't remember the numbers, but we had the townhouse full of people because we did mail outs, etc. And we had one family, obviously we looked to get business out of it too.
Right.
We had a family at Hilton Head that had 97 acres of land. I went down along with one of my agents, and we did presentations, went back for a family reunion. They got ready to list the property, and they listed it with somebody else. I said, no more coastal people in my life forever. Well, we're doing some now, so but it's financing for them. But that's the true story. NARAB did a great job with that, along with the National Bar Association, that went in to see what they could find, how properties were transferred or properties taken. And there's been one story recently, and prominently in the newspaper, of a 94-year-old lady who was being trampled over by somebody, and I've forgotten the star's name. I don't keep up with them, but he paid for a new house, and unfortunately, she just died before it could be done. But there's a lot of that kind of thing that has happened.
So NARAB now is doing something very similar. We have an MOU with the Bar Association, with the Black attorneys, and we, on our our Black Wealth Tour, one of the sessions that we are offering is how to keep Big Mama's house. Oh. So hopefully we will accomplish keeping the property in the family, and we will have more people to do some estate planning, because many of our people are transitioning without proper estate planning, without having a will. So that's one of the sessions that we're offering, and we're also partnering with Enterprise, and we have the Black Developers Academy, because we understand that there's a housing shortage or inventory shortage, and one way to increase inventory is to offer more, build it. And one way to increase Black home ownership is have Black developers.
Morris, I'll start with you with this question. What does generational wealth mean to you, and how is home ownership related to really building the wealth in our communities?
With home ownership, it broadens your financial background as an individual. And with that broad financial background, you are able to purchase. Your purchasing power has increased. With that increased purchasing power, you're able to go out and purchase property, which of course is something that you can have in your name. The property that's in your name, once you get older, you could, with the proper instruments in place, wills and so forth, you're able to pass it on to your next generation. And of course, what we were just talking about, I think heirs properties, unfortunately, we've lost a lot of that. But with the generational wealth, hopefully our generation will have the knowledge to retain those properties, make sure our wills, our estates are properly maintained and are in place, so that when we do transition, our children, the next generation, will be able to have homes, buildings that they could utilize, that they could use for income, that they can use for shelter. and hopefully their financial portfolio, will be able to grow so that they're able to pass it on to their kids, the next generation. Unfortunately, we are 2 or 3 generations behind. We're behind the 8 ball.
Yes,
and
indeed
again,
we are. And I think that's why this kind of meeting is so important. Thank you for doing it, because it helps us to see where we are, helps us to see ourselves as others see us, to know where we are, to know what's happening to us, to know that the home we purchased in Brooklyn 30 years ago is valuable for helping us to keep the land we have, the farmland we have in South Carolina now. And I hope that NARAB will continue to do the kind of job you are doing now of advising the public, the Black public in this case, of where we are, what we have, what we need to do to be a part of the ongoing forces that are shaping America.
What do you guys think about if someone were to say they rather just rent their home, they don't want to deal with maintenance? That's what I hear a lot. They don't want to deal with if something breaks, fixing it. They just rather, be long-term renters. Do you guys have any opinion on if that is good or not good?
That is not good. And that's why I say again, I'm glad NARAB exists, because it's NARAB that keeps these kind of issues in front of us. You see, we have been trained, believe it or not, by the other side of our society to think negative about our own good. And until associations like NARAB come along and constantly tell us that that's not good thinking, direct us in, send us in different directions, we will continue to go down that route. So thank you again for doing that, NARAB.
And how important is it for you to have your family involved, or like you worked with you saw your dad working in the industry, and then you're in the industry, and like I told you, your brother is actually my contractor doing some work at my house right now. So it's kind of full circle. You guys are all in the industry in some capacity. How important is that to building wealth, like learning, how to do what your dad did, and you work for your father's company, which means all of that wealth is staying in your family instead of going out and working for someone else?
That has given me a great appreciation of what it means to have home ownership. It has, watching these gentlemen do what they have done, has given me a great appreciation of the blacks becoming homeowners. It has helped me to appreciate their work, to not let their labor go in vain, because I'm not going to let that happen. I'm going to do what I can to help promote home ownership, to help those renters, lifelong renters, get out the mindset of not wanting to fix a plumbing pipe, not wanting to change out electrical light fixtures. They, with that mindset removed, it will hopefully allow them the courage to purchase homes, to go into home ownership. So that's my mission, is to entice other blacks, younger blacks, to become homeowners and not renters.
What I would also say is, so purchase a condo, a condominium, or a townhome, and you have the HOA that will maintain the exterior of your property. You're paying for maintenance one way or the other, whether it be the increase in rent every year or the actual maintenance. But if you're not someone that prefers to be in the yard doing lawn work on the weekend, you'd rather be outside, as it's said now, you can do that. Purchase a townhome, purchase a condominium, or purchase an investment property. You can live in an apartment and own real estate at the same time. You don't want to deal with the maintenance? Let property managers deal with it. I think you guys do property management?
We do.
Yeah, in Columbia, Morris Morgan Real Estate does property management. So allow someone else to deal with those issues. And there's always a home warranty. So if you purchase a home, you can purchase a home warranty. And that's a type of a maintenance plan for you.
That is true.
But home ownership is the first gateway into generational wealth. Once you purchase a home and you create equity, you maybe can alleviate student loans. If you have children going to college, you can tap into your equity to pay for your education, your children's education, or your education. You can tap into your equity and start that business that most people want to have. You can tap into your equity and get into the stock market. You don't want to tap into your equity and not have any equity, but make sure you're doing something beneficial with the equity. It's a gateway to generational wealth. And I know today generational wealth is a buzzword, but I would challenge everyone to think about your net worth. Not what you have in the bank, but your net worth.
Wow, that's important. So we were also, before we started, talking about how it can be misconceptions where people get started in real estate and they may think they're about to make $1 million in those first couple of months. So we can start with you, Mr. Ruff. What are your thoughts on people who think real estate is kind of this get-rich-quick career? Would you agree with that?
They'd be highly disappointed. Real estate takes a lot of do it yourself. I mean, you have to really have it in your gut to get up every morning early, get started before anybody else, and work longer than anybody else in order to be successful. It's not as easy as it seems, but I think the key is prospecting. You have all these do not call laws and other things today. Back when I was in the business, we had up to 3 Central 21 offices and up to 59 agents, I believe, was the highest we ever got. But I would go get a bus from South Carolina Electric and Gas and not tell anybody, but pick everybody up at the office on Saturday morning when we had 2 sales meetings, one on Saturday and one on Wednesday. The bus would pick everybody up and we'd go out to a subdivision. I'd have copies of things and they'd knock on doors. And the bus would come back an hour later and pick everybody up. It's kind of a trick, but it did get some people into the mood of prospecting. I remember one area that we used to do that in, Meadow Lake, and I had 2 agents that lived out there, and they go to his house and have a beverage or 2. But then I started getting everybody to get a list, ask people, please sign this to show that you've been here. So it worked with some people, and it made some people better. Some people, it drove the others off, the ones that weren't going to do it anyway. So,
but Chuck, with that said, it is still true that the people with the money make the money. And that's why we're here today, to help Black folks become more of the people with the money. If you've got $1 million, it's easier to go out there and buy 10 houses. If you don't have any money, it's difficult. And so that we're trying to get us in the position to get out there and make the money, to be the haves rather than the have-nots, so that we can go out there and buy 3 or 4 houses if we want to, and still have enough to pay the light bill and water bill and what have you. What we're trying to say is the way has been paved. We've got to walk in it.
Mm-hmm. It's powerful. So for Denise and Morris, what are your thoughts when people think they need to put 20% of the home price down as a down payment in order to get a home, and that's what's in their head, so they say, I don't have that, so it's really not obtainable to me?
Yeah. That misconception is one of the tasks that NAREB is trying to break down. Right now, as Denise mentioned earlier, there are several down payment assistance programs that are available. With FHA, it's 3.5%, down is what you need. Of course, with VA, it's 100%. Of course, then there's rural development where there's 100% financing. Those programs, we're trying to spread, get the word out with those programs. A lot of folks, unfortunately, are not aware of those programs, and unfortunately, they live with that misconception of, needing to have 20% down. And of course, with that, they just discouraged. They're discouraged from looking into investigating more into how to purchase a home, what it will take to purchase a home, and that's one of the things that NAREB offers home buyers workshops, education programs to educate the public on how to purchase homes.
We have other lender partners as well that they offer 100% financing, conventional products with 100% financing or no mortgage insurance premium. And the lack of mortgage insurance premium can save you $100 a month or more on your mortgage payment. And then South Carolina State Housing, if you're getting an FHA loan, which requires 3.5% down, South Carolina State Housing will offer up to $8,000 in down payment assistance. And then there are other products, the FHLB. I would say get with a good realtist, and they will help you for those that are considering home ownership and are concerned about down payment. Get with a good realtist, and they will give you the information you need.
Thank you. And working on the financial side, what made you transition from being an agent to actually doing the financial part of lending?
Well, we had a pretty diversified real estate organization. We had our own mortgage company for about 20 years and also sold some insurance. But I was with the National Association of Real Estate, National Association of Realtors in New York. And in that same meeting, another meeting, were some international lenders, private lenders, private bankers. And I was given several people's cards. And at that time, real estate was going through some turmoil. And so I gave my cards to some people, and we exchanged cards, and ended up meeting some people who actually made loans that I'd never heard of before. 100% financing on commercial, whereas if I was using a U.S. bank, it's 30% down. So I looked at it, and we started doing those kinds of loans. And today it's a great opportunity. We have about 30 consultants across the U.S., the Caribbean, that work with us. And they make loans that you just wouldn't believe. I've gotten loans from, not knocking U.S. banks, but I got to have 25 or 30% down. I can get a loan or give a loan for 100% with just paying the closing costs. So that drove me in that direction. We had been doing a number of churches also. That kind of pulled me out of the real estate business because I liked doing it, and the pay was good. We did like 197 churches over a 20-year period in 7 different states. So we pulled back a little bit when COVID started because they liked for you to come shake their hands, and I quit doing that. So, hadn't gotten back in that habit yet, but so it's been a good change. Even though I love the real estate, I pulled away from it because of those reasons.
And what about you getting involved in building Mr. Washington?
Well, I think my day is basically over. I don't expect I will ever again get into either building or selling a lot of real estate, but my heart is still there. I still want to see our folks stand in the market the way the others do now. Chuck, I hope you were saying with what you said a minute ago to Black folks in general, keep on keeping on. Just don't stop. Don't let anybody tell you you can't do it anymore. You can, but you must do it. You can't sit there and wait for it to come to you. It isn't. You got to go get it, but it's there.
And can you each give just one piece of final advice to maybe someone who's trying to get into the real estate industry as an agent, or maybe they want to become a broker one day, or even a potential home buyer that's feeling discouraged? Do you guys have one final, piece of advice that you guys can give?
I hate to say this, but it's true. We, meaning Black folks, have always been behind the 8 ball. Always. It didn't just happen yesterday, and it isn't going to go away tomorrow. We've got to keep pushing the envelope. We've got to keep on keeping on. And now, maybe we will get to that point where color is not a factor anymore. It still is a factor. I would say just don't give up. That's my advice. If I am to give any at all, just keep on going. Keep on believing yourself and know that America belongs to you. It is not the other man's. It is yours. Keep on keeping on.
Thank you.
My advice would be to become a homeowner. You become the landlord. You rent out, to others. It's obtainable. You just have to seek the proper channels. And as Denise said, this is what, the realtors do. We assist those folks that are looking for home ownership. So just find your good realtors. We're out there. We're all over the place. And let us help you into home ownership. It's a great thing. And broaden your financial background.
Thank you.
I would say for those that are desiring home ownership, contact a realtor or realtist. If you have obstacles to overcome, if credit is an issue, as long as you're willing to put in the work, you can get there. Wherever you are, it didn't happen overnight, and it is not going to change overnight. It takes work. It took work to create bad habit and bad credit. So it's going to take work to create good credit. I was speaking with a young lady yesterday that purchased her home in her early 20s and almost went into foreclosure, avoided foreclosure. But yesterday she sent me a screenshot, and I am so proud of this young lady. She has, her credit scores are like 770, was the lowest score. So she kept working. She did not give up. So get with someone. With NARAB, we have housing counselors. We have an NID division, which is housing counselors, HUD certified housing counselors that can assist you. If you're interested in becoming a real estate agent, I would say do it. The water is deep, but do it. Get a good mentor. For a long time, Mr. Ruff didn't know this. He and I belonged to the same franchise. He was an owner of the franchise. I was an agent. He in Columbia, I in Greenville, but I watched him from afar because I was impressed. I think you were the first Black person to own the franchise in South Carolina.
I believe so. That's what I've been told.
So what I should have done, and this is what I would recommend that you do, don't just watch them from afar, call them and ask them to mentor you. I could be so much further if I had picked the telephone up and called and asked him to mentor me. I could be so much further if I had reached out to a realtist and joined NARAB 20 years ago.
Yes.
Thank you. And you will leave us with our final piece of advice.
Well, I think it's essential that no matter what your station in life is, you own something, starting with a house. Real estate is a great business. It's changed since I did house selling. But I think the essential part of being successful that a lot of people don't understand is that you got to join the association. This isn't a plug for the realtors, but it is. That was the hardest thing to get people to do. And after you join, participate. Be active. I used to tell our people all the time, serve on a committee, get to know other people, because once you get to know other people, a lot of the things that John has emphasized kind of subsides. They don't know you. Not that I ever wanted to be popular, but I wanted them to know who I was. So when I send you an offer, I expect you to present it to that seller. Had an occasion on one time where I went to a broker's office and he picked the the contract up and started marking. I said, "What you doing?" "They ain't gonna take this. They won't take this." I said, "You present it the way I gave it to you." And of course he called the police. But the lady called me because we'd already presented one offer. And she said, "My listing expired anyway. Bring your contract out." So I said, "Thank you. Here it is." But you got to be active in the business, and you got to be active in the associations. You ought to join NARAB. You should join the Board of Realtors, and you got to participate. that was the hardest thing to do because the fees involved. But everybody in my office had to pay that fee of leave. And after you pay your fee, I encourage you to join, get on a committee. Most did not. And that's where they missed the boat.
Well, thank you all for joining us. I think this conversation...
Thank you for having us.
Thank
you
you
so much.
I think this was an important conversation. I think getting your story out here, I know we've been trying to do that for quite some time with the lawsuit story and letting people know just how far we've come, but also how far we still have to go. As you've heard from these guests, get involved, own homes, become the landlord, have a seat at the table and make sure your voice is heard. Be actively involved in changing the industry and doing your part. And as always, this is another episode of our Good Life podcast, and happy Black History Month.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.